So, today we're facing a deep crisis. Our society is sick and decaying, plagued by the worst pandemic in human history, a global economic crisis and political turmoil. The storming of the US Capitol on January 6th wasn't an exception to an otherwise calm period, as major news sources have framed it. It was a continuing sign of the deep distrust and frustration that has been pressing on the seams of a dysfunctional society near a breaking point. It's been decades in the making, not the result of actions by a few deranged personalities like Trump and other far right politicians and pundits, but it's both a symptom and an outgrowth of the constant crisis ordinary people have been forced to endure. The COVID crisis itself is also a symptom of this sickness. Viruses like COVID 19 would normally pass through wildlife deep in the forest, never coming into contact with humanity. But due to profit driven deforestation, viruses now jump from wild animals to humans and spread around the world. In the case of COVID 19, this has already meant over 2 million deaths and climbing. The COVID crisis has exposed just how chaotic this society truly is. World leaders failed to coordinate a global response to slow the spread. Instead, most countries stalled to protect their economies, prioritizing different corporate and national interests over our health and safety. Nowhere is this truer than in the United States, where the refusal to deal with the spread of COVID has made the US the leading country for COVID cases and fatalities, exposing what it truly means to be number one. Despite the lip service paid to so-called essential workers, they certainly weren't treated as if they were essential. They've had the highest rates of infection of any group in society. As usual, we see how the working class is considered disposable under capitalism. Like so many other companies with workers packed into warehouses, Amazon had extremely high rates of infection due to minimal protections. But nothing shows the complete disregard for the lives of working people better than the meatpacking industry. Here, workers had some of the highest rates of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths of any single industry. All protections went out the window. Outbreaks were regular and large. Some managers even organized a betting pool on which workers would contract the virus. In many industries, the lack of testing and protective measures has been the result of a conscious choice made by management to save money. This is even true in hospitals, jam-packed full of COVID patients. Healthcare workers still don't have adequate PPE, testing, or tracing. As of December 23rd, nearly 300,000 healthcare workers have gotten COVID, and 3,000 of them have died, as they cared for others who are getting sick and dying. And we know there are probably many more that go unrecorded. Instead of guaranteeing health coverage amidst a pandemic, 7.7 million workers and 6.9 million dependents lost access to healthcare as they lost their jobs. To reduce costs and increase profits, our healthcare system is deeply understaffed. Hospital beds and supplies are severely limited. As a consequence, we have both one of the most expensive and one of the most dysfunctional healthcare systems in the world. Rather than governments and drug companies coordinating globally to develop a vaccine, the process has looked more like an arms race, with companies scrambling to patent their version first as they drool over the future profits they hope to make off of this catastrophe. The economic impact of the COVID crisis has been devastating on the United States. Small businesses have had to shutter their doors permanently. Big businesses have placed the burden of the crisis on the backs of their workers, with layoffs, pay cuts, and a tax on what little benefits workers have. The number of households facing food insecurity has doubled since March. Job loss today has been worse than in the Great Depression. 22 million people lost their jobs in March and April. And so far, only half of these jobs have been recovered. Up to 10 million of them are estimated to be lost for good. Families struggle as schools and daycare centers remain closed, parenting in isolation, working from home, or scrambling to try to find childcare so they can go to work. Many face barriers to using remote instruction, lacking computers, internet connection, or both. Inside their homes, people are isolated and struggling. Already plagued with domestic abuse, depression, drug, and alcohol abuse before the pandemic, now 40% of adults are struggling with at least one mental health or substance abuse issue, and 100 people died daily from suicide. Amidst this desperation, unsurprisingly, violence has surged, with non-fatal shootings increasing by 50% in 2020, along with spikes in homicides. Plus, we're on the brink of a serious housing crisis. With so many people losing their incomes, many are struggling to pay their mortgages or rent. Moratoriums have only delayed the issues for some. Many will have no ability to fork up the money when back pay comes due. More so than ever before, poor people who have been thrown away, locked in jails and prisons, are left to rot and die, with COVID-19 infecting and killing them in mass waves. In immigration detention facilities where whole families have been locked up in cages, we've seen the same thing. And for the homeless population, little to nothing has been done to protect them from the virus. For people of color, the problems and suffering have been even greater than in the overall population. Racism is another disease that infects our society. In employment, health, violence, harassment, police brutality, and imprisonment, people of color have faced the worst that capitalism has to offer, especially during the pandemic. But the COVID crisis is merely a symptom of the capitalist condition. It's only further exposed the problems that have been worsening for decades. In the most productive and wealthy period in human history, capitalism has produced mass dislocation and misery for most of the population. 3 people in the United States hold as much wealth as the bottom half of the population, acting like leeches on society, sucking the wealth produced by the starving millions into their coffers, profiting off of our poverty. Already before the pandemic, we were plagued with high unemployment, with most new jobs offering low wages, more precarious work with little to no benefits, lack of childcare, underfunded schools, rising debt, depression, suicide, and addiction. Millions were already overworked, shrugging off hazardous conditions or mistreatment at work because they considered themselves just lucky to have a job. Many were already being pushed into the streets, forced to become modern-day nomads, living out of cars or in crowded homes. Rather than see attempts by the government to cope with these social crises, such as adequately funding schools or creating public works and jobs, we've seen tax cuts for the wealthy, reductions in health and safety and environmental protections, cuts to local and state budgets and services, and cuts to healthcare. At the same time, we've also seen the expansion of the military budgets. Another potentially fatal symptom of this ongoing disease of capitalism is climate change. Burning fossil fuels for profit has brought us into the era of climate catastrophe. It's forced millions of farmers to migrate across borders, burned down vast areas of land, sunk whole islands, caused famine and drought, and much, much more. If the capitalist disease goes untreated, climate change threatens the very existence of our life on this planet. COVID-19 has merely ripped a scab off of a gaping wound, leaving many poor and working people sore, raw, angry, and looking for the solutions that this society has failed to offer them. With that, I'll pass it to Mark.
Thanks so much, Eden.
Thank you. So even though the system of capitalism is responsible for bringing us to this moment, we can see who's been captaining this ship. First, there was Trump. With the virus, Trump wanted people to believe the economic restrictions were caused by the overreaction of scientists and Democrats. He wanted to push the blame away from himself as he tried to get reelected. And the consequence, of course, of all this, as we've heard, was just a complete mishandling at every turn, basically letting the virus spread without limits. And now the dysfunctional rollout of the vaccine in the US will be lucky to get 50% of the population vaccinated by the end of 2021. Overall, their response to this virus has been a total disaster. Trump also spent 4 years spewing his hate in order to further divide the population. As disturbing as the events at the Capitol were, they were hardly surprising. Trump and many Republicans have been playing on people's anger and fear for months, continuously calling the election a fraud And this message was aired over and over again on news channels and radio stations. How different was it than his earlier calls to liberate Michigan, or his support for Kyle Rittenhouse, the shooter who killed 2 protesters in Kenosha? We saw this in Charlottesville with his fine people on both sides, and really all throughout his presidency. It's no wonder many of Trump's supporters are members of far-right, racist, white nationalist, and neo-fascist groups. But of course, many are not. Some of them have also had their lives destroyed during the pandemic. Some have also struggled with years of rising costs of living without rising wages. But Trump was able to twist that anger around, inject it with racism, and redirect it at immigrants, women, Muslims. But in the last election, Trump received 10 million more votes than in 2016, and actually increased his support among Black and Latino voters. So Trump still represents something to many people. And Trump can't take all the blame. During the first 4 years of Trump, the Democrats raised their voices and carried out investigations against him, but did very little other than tell people to vote for them in 2020. Trump passed record tax cuts for banks and corporations and billionaires. And so it was no surprise that as millions of people were suffering, billionaires made over $1 trillion during this pandemic. But of course, the Obama administration also catered to the banks and corporations at the expense of workers. We can't forget that the many concessions against working people during the Obama administration helped create a path for Trump. Obama saw the largest transfer of wealth to the richest 1% and record levels of inequality, all paid for by deep cuts to workers' pensions, health benefits, social services, and massive layoffs, and of course, the disappearance of full-time benefited jobs. And regarding the pandemic, the Democrats got too much credit for saying a lot but doing next to nothing. In California, Governor Newsom talked about science and masks and social distancing, but his strategy in this state has been a total failure. When infection rates declined a bit, economic restrictions were often lowered, only to cause infections to go up again. This was true pretty much across the country, whether Democrats or Republicans were in charge. And whether you lived in a dense city like Los Angeles or way out in a sparsely populated rural town, usually the restrictions were often the same, which made no sense. And now we're seeing the highest hospitalization and death rates at any time. Medical care is being rationed. The city of Los Angeles has had to remove air quality restrictions because there have been so many cremations of dead bodies from the virus. So yes, the Democrats know how to talk. They know what to say to get people to believe they're on our side. In response to the protests after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the Democrats wear kente cloths. They took knees and took photos. They spoke against white supremacy and for reorganizing the police. They helped remove the Confederate flag from Mississippi and NASCAR. They gave their approval to other changes to racist institutions. But on the ground, what has really changed with the police and their role in society? Nothing. And where did many of these horrific murders of Black people by police take place? In cities under Democratic mayors, in states under Democratic governors. And now we're supposed to pin all of our hopes on the Biden and Harris administration. There's no question that seeing Trump leave the White House looking alone and pathetic felt like a huge relief for many people. And of course, many people have been encouraged by the first woman vice president, a woman of color. And many have commented what a relief it is to feel like normal has returned to the White House. But we can't forget that normal is what also got us here. We've seen 8 years of Biden as vice president. We know what to expect. As the economy suffers, his administration will look to rescuing the banks and corporations. Already with few cabinet picks announced, the agenda is quite clear. He has nominated Janet Yellen as the Treasury Secretary. She was chair of the Federal Reserve during most of Obama's second term and has made millions lobbying for big banks ever since. 2 of Biden's picks come from the leadership of a company called West Exec Advisors, which advises some of the biggest corporations. Their slogan is bringing the situation room to the boardroom. Another pick is the managing director of BlackRock, a $7.8 trillion investment firm, one of the biggest investors in oil and coal. And there are more like this to come. Biden's pick for Secretary of Education is Miguel Cardona. He says he wants to put public schools first. But of course, the Obama administration oversaw the largest period of education funding cuts, school closures, and privatization of schools in the history of this country. It's a little too late to be putting education first. Cardona's main goal is to create what are called labor management partnerships in education. These will essentially make it easier for the administration and the district to make new demands on teachers and make sweeping changes without having to wait until a new contract is negotiated. The Biden administration also intends to pass an immigration reform bill. It's supposed to include an 8-year path to citizenship for all DACA recipients and a 5-year path for a green card for those currently undocumented in the country. This would be a huge relief for many. But 8 years is plenty of time for the bill to be overturned if it is even passed. And we can't forget that a record 3 million undocumented immigrants were deported under the Obama administration, many of whom were separated from their families, many children thrown into detention centers. Many of these policies helped pave the way for Trump's further attacks on immigrants. Biden has also promised to be a vigilant defender of the environment. But remember, he campaigned on a promise not to ban fracking. And a very big deal has been made about the executive order he already signed to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. But let's recall what NASA's top climate scientist, James Hansen, had to say after Obama signed it in 2015. He said, "It is 100% pure, unadulterated bullshit." Why? Because it makes targets that no country actually has to follow. So much for an administration that respects scientists, not when the science goes against the interests of fossil fuel companies. The Biden administration promises to soon increase the stimulus to working people and some other proposals that will likely be better than what we've seen so far. Obviously, another $2,000 will certainly help. But remember, the median household income is already $60,000 in debt. They say they will extend the moratoriums on evictions, but renters will still owe back rent. But no matter what the Biden administration throws at us, we have to remember we are living in an emergency. And these are going to be more Band-Aids on gaping wounds. They won't address any of the fundamental problems we face. The divisions Trump helped further stoke have not gone away. We can't expect the Democrats to be something they are not. They defend this system just as vigilantly as the Republicans. We can't look to the politicians from either party to get us out of the emergency we are in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Now we're on to the more inspiring and fun talk that Sarah has of some solutions. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, if everyone can bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to try sharing my screen, and I have 2 screens open. So let's see how this goes here. Okay. Almost there. Okay, can you guys see the slide? Yes?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. We're good to go. Okay, so you've heard a lot about what their plans are for our future. So now we want to take some time to talk about ours. Up to now, we've continued to make this system run in the interests of an incredibly tiny elite, while they keep us divided and fighting each other, to keep us working for them. But why should we accept this? It's working people who do all of the work to make this system run. Who produces all the goods, works the assembly lines, drives the buses, stocks the warehouses, unloads the cargo, delivers the packages, cares for the sick, packs the groceries, and teaches the students. We are the overwhelming majority, and our hope for change comes from organizing ourselves in our workplaces, our neighborhoods, and our communities. And we have many examples to show what happens when we do organize and act together. The protests that erupted after George Floyd's murder pointed to our possibilities and showed the potential we have if we can organize our forces. More than 25 million people joined these protests against police violence and systemic racism throughout the summer. Or we could think back to a few months before that, to what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. In Detroit, bus drivers refused to work under unsafe working conditions. Within just 24 hours, their demands to protect their health and safety were met. In Oakland and other cities, bus drivers did similar actions with the same result. At the same time, there were demonstrations at hospitals all over the world, with healthcare workers demanding PPE and adequate safety protocols. When workers in one place take action, it shows others what is possible. Collective actions can become contagious. This crisis has also revealed the solidarity of ordinary people during a disaster. Nurses printed family photos to take into COVID patients in the ICU. Neighbors delivered groceries to the elderly and organized mutual aid networks. Quilters repurposed their quilting fabric, shower curtains, t-shirts, coffee filters to handcraft masks for the community. This is the human response of ordinary people. So when we think about what happened in the Capitol on January 6th, we must do the same thing. Look to our own forces for the solution. That means we must wholeheartedly oppose the vile racism and nationalism that were on display in DC by standing up and speaking out against racist and reactionary ideas and defending our coworkers and neighbors from any such attacks. Sorry, the two screen thing's giving me a little problem here. 1 second, thanks for your patience. As one example, the Flight Attendants Union argued that the right-wing demonstrators who participated in the Capitol be banned from their flights back home. In Boston in 2017, after the Charlottesville attacks, when white supremacists called a free speech rally, a so-called free speech rally in Boston, the 20 white supremacists who showed up were so badly outnumbered by the 40,000 counter-protesters that they left the park long before the rally was scheduled to end. What other possibilities could we imagine? In response to the pandemic, we could have a coordinated national response that prioritizes the health and lives of those who are most vulnerable to the disease. That means knowing exactly how much of the vaccine is available and having a clear plan for its distribution and storage. Workers themselves could participate in creating the plan so that the vaccine goes first to those who truly need it. We could have a nurse at every school and train retired healthcare professionals, dentists, medical and nursing students, and pharmacists to help with administering the vaccine. Ordinary people could participate in helping medical professionals to create a vaccine education campaign that would explain the vaccine with clear and simple language and respond to people's questions and fears. There could be mass vaccination sites at local schools, community centers, churches, sports stadiums, large parking lots, places that are known and easily accessible in every single neighborhood, and production of the vaccine could be dramatically ramped up. Train more workers, create more shifts, and requisition more factories if that's what's needed. Healthcare workers could reorganize the hospitals so that there are dedicated COVID treatment facilities, protecting countless others who are either healthcare workers or patients in hospitals. Healthcare workers that work in those treatment facilities could take over nearby empty hotels as COVID quarantine housing. There could be efforts to support these workers with food delivery and other resources. And what about the economic crisis? We could share the essential work that must be done to keep society running and ensure that everyone has a role to play. Everyone who needs work could have a job, and everyone could work far fewer hours. Why couldn't we double or triple the size of the teaching and janitorial workforce, commandeer unused office buildings, and teach in small pods in fully ventilated buildings that actually have functioning ventilation systems? What if all the creativity of video game designers was used to create top-of-the-line educational programming to help young students who are struggling with distance learning? Sorry, my second screen having problems again. People who are currently unemployed could be organized to cook and deliver meals to seniors and other vulnerable members of society. Sorry, everybody. This double screen thing gave me a little trouble, so just give me one, if you could just bear with me for 1 second. They could be trained to do the paperwork and help administer testing, tracing, and vaccinations. The beautiful artwork that we saw during the beautiful art that popped up during the Black Lives Matter movement this summer gave us a glimpse of what our cities might look like if we turned them into open air exhibits, where art was for the people and not just for the museums. Poets and writers and musicians and artists could be hired to give readings and performances made online for now, but afterwards at every neighborhood school or community center. We could begin to really deal with the climate crisis. We could hire more bus and train operators to increase the size of public transit fleets and decrease the number of passengers on any particular vehicle. We could nationalize the fossil fuel industries and transform them into carbon recapture facilities. The technology already exists for this. With workers' control, we could bury the carbon forever. We could begin creating the alternative energy networks necessary to actually confront climate change. We could provide solar power to homes and offices. We could clean up toxic waste sites that pollute so many poor neighborhoods. Just imagine how many more jobs this would create. We could make massive investments in reforestation programs, since major forests not only work as carbon sinks, they give us more biodiversity to protect against pandemics. We could use the pause of the pandemic to completely transform agriculture and make it more efficient and healthier for our planet, including hydro farms and regenerative farms. This type of farming is extremely productive, creates healthier foods, and could be another source of new jobs. Does all of this sound impossible? During the first Gulf War, in just 2 months' time, more than 120,000 troops, 700 tanks, and 1,400 armored vehicles were moved more than 7,000 miles around the world to the Persian Gulf. Those numbers ultimately swelled to nearly 500,000 people and 500,000 tons of cargo. If we can manage this kind of response for death and destruction, why not for the preservation of life on this planet? In other words, yes, we can begin to solve the difficult problems we face when we decide to look to ourselves and our own forces. If you're looking around to figure out how we're going to get out of this mess, the answer is simple. It starts with you and the individual decisions you make about whether to be a part of a collective fight for the future of our planet. If enough people make this choice, if ordinary working people become active and decide to fight together, then we can imagine a completely transformed society. The choice is yours to make. We hope you will join us to create this new future.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So thank you too to Mark and Eden. Hopefully that's given you some thoughts to chew on. So now we're going to move into our discussion portion of the evening. So all political perspectives are welcome. We just ask that you remain respectful. We're also going to keep to a 2-minute time limit just to make sure that everyone who wants to speak has the ability to. So make sure you pay attention to your screen. I'll be holding up a sign when you have 30 seconds left and then when time is up. So just again, to remain respectful so other people can go. We'll be doing a stack system, prioritizing people who haven't spoken. So you can get on the list to speak either by messaging list to speak, or at the bottom of your screen, there's a reaction tab. And in the reaction tab, if you click on raise your hand, you can get put on the list as well. If you're on the phone, pressing *9 will raise your hand. And then to mute or unmute, you can press *6. And we'll be ending around 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time. So in about an hour. And up first, we have Meg.
Oh, sorry. Am I unmuted? Sorry, I was really struggling.
We can hear you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meg. I'm in Baltimore. Thank you so much, Eden and Mark and Sarah, for the presentations. I think it did a really good job of explaining the crises that are all around us and sort of the situation we're in, but also giving us a lot of motivation at the end. I think the thing I've been most frustrated with in talking to my family and friends and coworkers is just hearing, I think Mark mentioned it, like this idea of like an excitement to a return to normalcy, and a sort of, I think not only with a new presidency, but that even translates into like COVID and all of these other crises that are around us, that people just seem like, oh, everything's back to normal. And it's not. Like COVID is the case numbers and the deaths are, you know, as crazy as they've ever been, maybe not as crazy, but close to. And, you know, our, as was described in this presentation, I think, you know, the outlook of the legislation that's going to happen, the sort of situation we're in, is as bad as it's ever been. And so I'm curious to hear how people are talking to their coworkers, how people are talking to the people around them about these things. And I think, you know, presentations like these are exactly what we need to sort of explain these ideas and how, you know, get across the urgency of how bad things are. And I'm just curious, you know, in this time where now there's sort of a feeling of like relief and sort of a lull in urgency, how we can keep up this momentum that we need to continue growing, because the crises coming at us are not slowing in momentum. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Meg. We have Aiden, and then Stack is open.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess I wanted to emphasize just, you know, what's possible if we're really organized and able. I mean, you know, think about everything that happened in the world the last year. In the US, we saw huge, massive protests, like in the presentation, against racism. But, you know, across the world, there was an uprising in Lebanon to depose the government. Argentinian women won the right to abortion through years of organizing. There were mass protests in Nigeria, Belarus. I mean, you know, across the world, there was really this mass activity. And, you know, imagine what would be possible if we had a really clear perspective and organization and goals about what we want to do. Because the energy, I think, is there, and so is our power. I think the key is just finding, you know, having a goal, not just to depend on a new politician or elect Biden or another Biden into office, but to take power ourselves and reorganize society in a way that's really humane and can address the crises we're facing. I think we can do it with our own organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Aiden. I have Axe Foley, and then Gabriel. Axe, you're muted. All right, we'll come back to Axe. We'll go to Gabriel.
I can't unmute, but now I'm unmuted. You want me to? I can
Nope,
wait.
you can go, and then we'll have Gabriel go next. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. I was trying to unmute, but host wouldn't allow me. Dang host. No, I appreciate the you know, as was said before, this is a time period where we absolutely need to have all of the facts and all of the information at our disposal, you know, as far as what we're facing, because there are so many different things that are going on in our lives. And I think it's part of people's, you know, sort of the way that we operate in this society. We're just trying to kind of get by. And, you know, just to answer the question, when I was talking to some of my coworkers earlier this week, you know, people kind of have this attitude of, you know, well, we kind of wait and see, you know, we'll see what this new administration will do, and we just kind of hope for the best. But then immediately, you know, just digging a little deeper, our conversation went into, you know, how his hometown in Mexico was, you know, he's just seeing the deforestation happening year after year. And it's just, you know, and that immediately to me, you know, exactly as was said before, the loss of that biodiversity is completely linked with the way that these viruses are finding a way out into the human population. So, you know, I think, yeah, things are incredibly linked. And, you know, the way that people think about it is, you know, then to kind of wait and see. But if we have this view or experience, or even like a historical understanding of what ordinary people have done in the past to face these unprecedented challenges, I think there is a lot of hope to be had there. And, you know, I work in transit, and it's just been amazing, you know, trying to organize with some people around me. Thank you. That, you know, people have these skills and talents that are incredible, and it's only, once you sort of see that there's an opportunity or a way for that to be expressed, it just blows me away what people's capacities are and the amount of people that they know in their networks that they're able to, pull together on a moment's notice. And, I think we could organize transit in so much more, sensible way, especially with the climate crisis that's all around us. So thank you.
Thanks, Axe. We have Gabriel and then Maria. Okay, we will go on to Maria next.
Oh yeah, no, it works. It works now. Sorry.
It works now. Cool.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that I can't help but be pessimistic whenever Biden and Democrats say return to normalcy. Normalcy to me is people dying because they don't have the medicine they need. My own grandmother, she died of cancer because she just couldn't afford the medicine, so she just let it happen. My family, we live paycheck to paycheck. I was going to get a job to go pay for my college, but I can't do that because the stuff was closed last summer. So I'm in a bad situation. Return to normalcy to me is not being able to take care of myself. And when I hear Democrats say we're going to go back to that, like I don't want to. And this is disillusioned me from believing in this system. Right? In order for any change to happen in America, we need to do it ourselves. And the reason why is because those options that we can vote for are all the same. They're the status quo. They're going to do the exact same things. You have one horrible option and another horrible option. There's no choice. So any change that we want to bring about in America has to be done by us and us alone. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. We have Maria next and then Yolanda.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, just wanted to give a bit of my perspective. My name is Maria. I'm a student, and within a year, I'll be graduating into this world of pure chaos and also a world of pure possibility. And I really hope that we are going towards the path of possibility. And I really believe that we can. And, just thinking about everything that Sarah was saying, the reforestation part was just a single thing that was just amazing to think, but everything coming together. And also I can only imagine if we have all of us just putting our heads into solving this big problem that is just fixing the world, what kind of amazing things we can come up with, because we all have this very amazing potential for creativity as well as change. And yeah, and in the middle of all of this, yeah, I can't forget also, because this was a pandemic that affected right away the most rich nations, and within those nations, the most rich in these nations, how immediate was the response to the pandemic. But even was a response that was not for everybody. We could see when Trump got sick, he was the person that right away got the treatment, while millions of people didn't have any treatment at all, even if they were in the US or in Europe. And yeah, so I think not being part of this 1%, we're kind of just left for ourselves. And this is just the biggest lesson I think I will take from all of this. And just how we don't need to wait for the rich and powerful to be there for us and fix our problems. We can all make it ourselves and be our own saviors. So yeah, this is my lesson. And I'm curious to hear what you guys got from all of this.
Thanks, Maria. We have Yolanda and then Jolene, and feel free to get on the on the list if you're in the chat. I can't really keep track of that. So, Yolanda.
Okay, I think I'm on.
You're on.
Okay. First of all, thank you for those 3 presentations. They were great and a lot of great information. But I mean, the Democrats, they're not going to do much for us. I mean, they gave up working families decades ago. Our standards of living has continued to decline over the past 20 and 30 years. We have white supremacists and fascists, in our Congress and our so-called government that have finally bravely exposed themselves. We knew they were there, but now they're brave enough to come out because conditions are such as they are. And some of the Democrats not exactly wanting outright supremacy and fascist dictatorship right now said, okay, we want to get our power back. So, they put out all this stuff. They're printing money to feed the masses who can't, provide food, for their household. They're promising to stop the murders of Black and brown and people of color now. This has been going on for over 100 years. And now they're saying, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do something now. They want their power back. But what are they going to do for us once they get their power back? When we get ill from COVID, are we going to get the antibodies, to get us through? Are we going to get the vaccines? No. But all these rich folks, they got sick, they got all their stuff. They got the antibodies, the remdesivir, all that stuff. And that's how it always is. But what we need, if we want to go forward, is we need a Labor Party to move things in the direction for working families, because Biden is not our savior. If we do nothing, we will have a right-wing fascist government leading America. And I think that we saw that Bernie, he put up something where folks can donate $2 to $5 for their cause.
But wrap up, Yolanda.
Okay, thanks. But we have to get on and get out there broadly because time is running out. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing, Yolanda. We have Jolene and then Stephen C.
Great. Thank you all so much for the presentations and for the discussion. And I'm really looking forward to hear from new voices. There's a lot of us here today, so I hope we get through to some new people who want to jump on and share or ask what's on their minds. I think it's, I have so many thoughts, but I guess the first thing is it's such an incredible time that we're living in right now. I mean, things can change so quickly, just like, Sarah kind of brought up the Black Lives Matter protests and the 25 million people who go to the streets. That's just one short movement. It's just one short mobilization. And all of the crises that we talk about, it's why I think we have to talk so clearly about what the problems are and what the stakes are. Because these are also opportunities for us to all react and for us all to act on defending our own interests. And it means that all of the people around us are looking at the world in a new way. When the Capitol, when people stormed the Capitol, it means that everyone around us is also trying to figure out what kind of democracy do we live in and what kind of world do I want to live in? And so all of these different questions are being presented to people, and it's why we put on these events, and it's why it's so important for us to reach out to our networks and invite many people. But I think one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently, I work in a very large warehouse for a large shipping and what do you call it, industry. And so I've been looking at how utterly efficient this massive warehouse is. We send out, I can't even count how many pallets and pallets and pallets of packages we send out to DC, to Virginia, to Delaware, all along the mid-Atlantic region. And those are just packages that I handle. And yet there's whole zip codes in the city that I live in that are never going to get any of those packages because they don't have the money to afford it. And yet this is the infrastructure that we have to be able to take over and utilize for real need, not just who can afford it, but who needs these things immediately and quickly. And we have the infrastructure to meet those needs. Thanks.
Thank you, Jolene. We have Stephen C. next.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yeah. So the one kind of comment or statement I want to make is kind of piggybacking off of what Meg introduced earlier about what are the conversations that people are having regarding COVID with people around them. And the one kind of realization that I've made is that COVID kind of showed us, two things. One is just how terrible and just how blatantly obvious the wrong side of the wrong side of capitalism really is. But at the same time, it made me realize on the other side of the coin that just how deeply entrenched mankind is in trying to uphold it, even from the people, even from the proletariat, all on the way up. And it's curious to me because I live in Elizabeth, New Jersey, so there's two nightclubs around here. One of them is one of the more popular ones in the region, and up until as early as November, December, there are people lining up around the block to try to get in, and people are either wearing masks or they're not wearing masks or whatever. But there's a requirement that you need to have socially distance in there or whatever. But at the same time, I don't really see people caring too much, and people are looking for excuses to party or whatever it is. So I don't really see much of a concern for what's going on as much as you would imagine there would be. And there is a bit of pessimism on my side, because even before COVID, it was difficult to have conversations like this with people, but even more so, or just about the same difficulty is being had now. So it's, I can't imagine that my experiences are universal. I can imagine there are people on this call that have probably found it easier. Maybe there are other people that have found it harder, but I don't really see the effects that COVID's had on society and people having the kind of mental or emotional affect to kind of steer their thinking or their mentality in a different direction. And it kind of speaks to kind of just a positive feedback loop that we have, where capitalism kind of creates these ideologies and these morals that people kind of begin to follow and uphold. And then as they do it, it kind of contributes to the exacerbation of the system and as it goes on. So yeah, that was kind of my thought. And I'm just, curious to see if anyone's had the same kind of experiences as I have. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Stephen. I have Eden.
Yeah, I just volunteered to talk since there's no one else. So as I talk, I want everybody who is nervous to speak to, work up the courage and raise your hand. Because the more people who speak, who aren't just us who are comfortable already speaking, the more you'll make other people comfortable. But yeah, I wanted to say, just in response to this question of like, what do we do with the fact that people are, the question that was just posed by you, Stephen. I've been thinking about this a lot. And one of the things we're really working on, and the reason we hold events like this, is to try to build a force that has really extensive connections to the majority of the working class in the population, and has the ability to influence the course of events, so that we can really see the kind of transformation we're talking about happen. And I imagine if we had that force, which we're working on building now, and each of you could help us work on building, how we could have responded when COVID hit. There was so much misinformation, so much confusion. The CDC told us lies, literally told us lies. According, remember, I don't know if people remember, but told us that masks didn't help. And that's not because masks didn't help with the disease. It's because it fit their reality of not having enough masks, and their refusal, really, the rulers of this society, their refusal to produce them and make sure that they were distributed to people. So what if we had had a force that was really interconnected with people, where when this hit, we could have said, hey, this is what this disease really is. Here's some truths, so that people could really believe or could really understand what was going on. Because right now, I understand people not understanding what's going on. I understand people, going out and not really understanding the serious impact that their actions have on the rest of the population. But I think, in my small example, when I talk to my friends about it, they would turn to me, they'd be like, I don't know what to trust from the politicians, from anyone else. but I know you, and I know that sometimes you're with a group of people that has a perspective that can kind of see what's going on in the world with some clarity, and can I get some perspective from you? But what if we had people linked to everybody? You know, the bus drivers had people like that, you know, and we could really have an impact on the perspectives that people have.
Thank you, Eden. I have Biro, then Dave Beard, and then Sam. So Biro up first.
Hey everyone, thanks for the presentations and stuff. They were excellent. Yeah, I work in transit on the West Coast, and I think, yeah, I mean, it's like pretty pessimistic time. I think that's a natural reaction to just the reality we're living in. And I'd say, like, as someone who's been like somewhat active in my union, it's harder just on in a workplace scenario to reach out to people just because of like the social distancing stuff. They're trying to keep people, you know, out of break rooms from each other and all that. But like that being said, it's like sort of like I feel like all the critiques I had about our management in our workplace before have been totally validated by this whole thing. And I'm sure that's got to be at every workplace or every institution anyone might be involved in. I haven't heard anyone say, oh, my management did a good job responding to like, or, you know, establishing contact tracing or whatever. It's like a total failure, like across every level of management. Like, it really goes to show they have no idea like what we do, like our movements across workplaces, like how to protect us. And like really they've been like, at least my management, it's just showed that they have no role in our in our day-to-day operations. And I think that's like important to sort of remind everyone of that right now, at least. That's sort of been my goal when I run into people, and just try to build the foundation for like independent thinking. So, you know, from like an independent working class perspective. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Biro. All right, I have Dave Beard and then Sam.
All right, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Cool. Thanks for the presentation. Just want to jump around on a couple of things in my 2 minutes. Definitely, the ruling class has been very over the top in their attack on working people, and you know, that's illustrated in the amount of money, you know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have made, and small businesses being closed. That's one thing that I wanted to mention. I'm a high school teacher. I just want to speak to the despair that is going on in our schools, and the lack of hope that I see that when I talk to my students. And I just wanted to make people aware of that. And another thing that's troubling for me that I say everywhere I can as much as possible is, you know, the near 40% unemployment rate for Black people in the United States. The migration happening, forced migration of Black people who are having to figure out where to go to survive. And the impact in my own community where men like me have been displaced because of the shift from the way the job force works into the streets of Oakland to live in tents. And no one seems to care or have that as a priority at all. I haven't heard, let's talk about the Democrats, but we haven't heard Bernie, we haven't heard Biden, we haven't heard Newsom, we haven't heard Kamala Harris, or anyone speak to this incredibly daily, sad situation that some people are living on the streets. That's it.
Thanks so much, Dave. I have Sam next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. There's so many things I want to talk about. So thank you all for bringing all that up. And some of the things I might say might have been touched on already. But I think I kind of just wanted to touch on the note of pessimism that was brought up. And I think a lot of us caught on at that moment and volunteered to speak because I think it's something we're all experiencing. But I think it's just a really difficult time to exist and to interact with the world. And I think I don't know, I struggle pretty constantly with the pessimism, especially when you're just outside and people aren't wearing masks and you're like, why aren't you doing anything? And it's frustrating. And I feel like I get the most pessimistic when I don't have anyone to put the blame on and I don't have anyone to hold accountable for what's happening. And I think it's so hard right now because we, the people in power aren't being held accountable and they're not doing anything to actually serve us. And when there's no one there to actually serve us as a community and us as a human being, I don't know where to put that anger anymore. And it's so much easier to get mad at my neighbor who's not wearing a mask, or I'm outside biking and people bike by you and aren't wearing masks and you're just oh, how dare they? And how do they not care about us and what's happening? And that doesn't do anything, that does nothing. That anger that I have that isn't going anywhere, I'm not stopping them and having a conversation and trying to talk to them about it, So I feel at this point, I know I have this pessimism and I know I have this anger. And when I need to know where to put it, I need to find who we hold accountable and how we hold them accountable. And I don't want to put that on people who aren't deserving of it. When the system hasn't taken care of us, I can't be mad at the individual. And at this point, who do we fight is the question, how, what do we do? And how are we going to do it? And how do we talk to our neighbors and how do we get ourselves to care about each other so that we can actually create some kind of systemic change where we can hold the right people accountable and actually do something about it? Because otherwise I'm not doing anything. I'm just yelling into a void, on Zoom. So, okay, bye everyone.
Thank you so much, Sam. I have Kat, then Kip, then Valeria. So let me get Kat unmuted.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I really love Sam's energy. I guess I've been feeling kind of frustrated, especially just listening to my mom's experience, because within the first year in her factory, there have already been 2 alarms of COVID, people getting COVID. And in spite of all that, she still is going into work, and because to her working means you can make an income, and that's enough for her. And I guess it's the situation that people with low income kind of go through, where it's they're not in the position to say no to a paycheck or to not going into work. And it's really frustrating to see that people feel there's no alternative, and that then there's the capital, people in the 1% who are benefiting from the the working class lack of opportunities and options. And I don't know, it just feels I hope that more people are become aware of that, more people will want to reclaim the power and really want to have and create those options that have not been given to them by the wealthy. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Kat. We have Kip, then Valeria.
Yeah, I think I share the frustration with a lot of people, but I think this is when we can't do something, we have to maintain that anger, but also find the ways to begin to organize with people. And it can start anywhere. I've seen, what this is what we're seeing right now is too reminiscent of what I saw in Detroit, where people did try to do things and we weren't capable of actually pulling together what really needed to be done. And that was to unite in that anger and actually direct it. We do know who's responsible. And if we're not actually sure, there's a lot of reading we can do. That's why an organization like this exists. We're not a reading club, but it's just like anything. There are train operators on here who I know. You don't just get in in the cab and just let it rip. You have to have training. Making a revolution and changing society is probably one of the most difficult things in the world to do. It's absolutely essential. And with enough people and that intelligence, that gathered together intelligence, we can actually be successful in transforming the society. The problem is we don't understand our collective power, and we have to begin to use it. The number of people I hear who talk about the virus, what's happening at their work. Oh, we had another exposure. Did I get it? I have to go down and get tested. But while I'm waiting for the test, I'm supposed to continue to work. Or the people in healthcare who are just at the point of exhaustion. How many more surges are we going to see take place? How many more people are we going to watch just pass away? So this is the time to take that anger, talk to our neighbors, and don't expect everybody to be on the same page, but we build links. We don't ignore each other, we respect each other. And, when we walk, if we ever get used to walking by the tent cities, riding by the tent cities, we have to slap ourselves in the head and say, what am I accepting? That is impossible. Just because there's no immediate solution doesn't mean that there isn't a solution. And we have to understand that. History shows us, and as I think somebody said it in the beginning, we see these movements around the world, they just need to reach their potential. We are part of that potential.
Thank you, Kip. We have Valeria, then Sasha, then JJ.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I am a healthcare worker, work in the emergency room in the Bay Area. And, I hear the frustration. I'm very, I would say I'm walking in that lane very often. But the one thing that I want to talk about, it was earlier, someone asked about it being easier, what kind of conversations we're having with folks in our workplace. So recently, not so much with the new Biden and Harris election, but when Trump and COVID first hit, and the response around that, it was easier to talk about who really is controlling all of this, and following the money was a way to talk about it. And obviously the capitalists don't care about us talking about capitalism. I found it easier. So therefore I actually did find it a little easier to talk about socialism, when people would ask, well, then what are you, or what do you care about, or what, if you're not a capitalist or you're not then people would question. And so ideas of socialism were easier to talk about. I didn't have to say socialism necessarily, but people ask, well, what kind of system is that? What are you talking about? And I think that those things are important. A little conversation here and there is valuable, but it's not always easy. In the ER, we get lots of sick people, and management's always telling us to do more and not really hiring anyone else to help us. So anyway, thanks. I saw my time's up.
Thanks for sharing, Valeria. We have Sasha, then JJ, and then Ash.
Hello, hey all. I'm Sasha, and I'm a public school teacher in Oakland. I want to really say thank you for the presentations, because I think when a lot of people I know hear socialism, it means pessimism. And I have learned through my studies recently in the last couple of years that, well, I believe it actually is optimism. I'm an optimist and I'm a socialist. So I wanted to share that because I hear you all, and that does not mean that I don't hear you speaking your truth and respect it. I just think that there's a lot, I had to take notes, I was a little nervous, a lot within our reach that we can do and that we are doing and maybe are not aware of. I think a lot of it is actually, you know, it's simple. Well, okay, I don't want to say that, but for me, I've been trying to hold what I've been calling consistent spaces for people. And yeah, it's on Zoom and it's not perfect, and I hope that it can change in our future. But consistent spaces for staff. I'm a teacher and I'm also active in our union, but we have different unions at our site and we need to come together. And yeah, it's those conversations. It's conversations with like-minded and unlike-minded people. What else did I want to share? Sharing articles, sharing ideas, having conversations, bringing people together to talk about a film. These things have really changed my life. And yeah, I wanted to stress reading too. Reading. I mean, I realized in the last couple of years that I heard one perspective on history. There's another perspective out there, and it's the people's history. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. We have JJ, then Ash, and then Mark.
Hey, everybody. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. But yeah, I'm JJ. I work for the utilities in a small city outside the Bay Area, and I have like a pretty conservative, workplace. And this is I just wanted to comment on our comrade Sam, who said like, how do you organize? What do you do? It's like my workplace is hella conservative. So, but they're just as mad as we are about the system. It's really funny, like how easy it is to talk about things with people who are like that, because not everybody is storming the gates of the Capitol building. Most people are just working class people who don't know which way to go, and and TV and propaganda is just bombarded with them every day. So that just sounds reasonable to them, because that's what surrounds them, and but if you level with people when you're working with them and they see that you're honest and an honest person, and you work hard, and that you get a camaraderie and a trust with them, and you bring a different perspective, they're more likely to hear you out, because I'm like one of the only Black people that work there. And this is, we live right next to a military base, and everybody's former military, and it's very conservative. But I'm able to make some strides and meet people and talk to you just because I'm with them every day, and I have the little conversations about family and everything else, and because everything's political, so you can make it political just off of that. And then and you get linked up with a group like this, and it gives you more ideas and more things, more opportunities, more things to come to, more, and you change their perspective through that a little, over time. So I wouldn't get discouraged, and I'll just keep fighting. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much, JJ. All right, we have next Ash, then Mark, then Bob and Z.
Hey, so I am a high school math teacher, and I want to thank Dave Bird for speaking on how students have felt hopeless, and a couple other people have kind of touched on that frustration. And so people have already said it, reading into history, like understanding that Dolores Huerta was able to get millions of people to stop buying grapes because she organized and connected with people. People made the city government lose hundreds of thousands of dollars during the Montgomery bus boycott. When people move together, there is beautiful and powerful creative ways to challenge the capitalist structure. And that is one of the ways that I try and infuse my math class, rather than talking about business, teaching the students the way that people that have been oppressed have always resisted and have always risen up. And talking about the insurrection is hard, but it is also a symptom of capitalism, because these racist white nationalists, they are distracted from the actual thing that is keeping everyone kept down. So when we're able to see how capitalism is an exploitative structure, and if we can use racism and sexism and homophobia and all the forms of hate to distract people from addressing that issue, I really appreciate the presenters, Sarah, Mark, and Eden, for bringing some of the history, context, and solutions. So thank you, everyone. And keep screaming into the void, self-care is sacred.
Thanks so much, Ash. So we have Mark, then Bob and Z.
Yeah, I just wanted to try to comment on a couple people, what people have said. So, way back when Meg was saying, many people feel sort of relieved right now, or they, a sense of kind of relaxing. They don't feel maybe the urgency. I mean, I don't think, not that you were saying this, I don't think, that's a problem in and of itself. Humans, we don't like to stay in a state of panic or a state of sort of crisis for very long. And that's basically where everyone has been for much of the year. So it's, it's perfectly understandable that many people are looking for ways to feel like they can, finally relax and exhale. I remember that feeling similar that day when Trump got COVID. It was like, okay, I can relax. Maybe this person's going to die. Anyway, that didn't happen. So it's understandable that people feel that way. And for those that are able to do it, that's great for them. But as we know, as Gabriel, as David, as Kat said so well, normal just isn't working for most people anyway. And so, what I want to say is we don't have to worry really about things going well for most people. If some people think that it's going well, it probably means they just aren't looking, far enough. One example that I forgot to mention was just an example of how this all was working was right after in California, right after Proposition 22 was passed, we saw all the largest grocery chains immediately lay off their unionized truck drivers and their deliverers so they can outsource all of that for companies like Uber and DoorDash and Instacart. And now it's happening elsewhere. And so, many things are going to continue to happen. And so where do we put all that anger? As Sam was asking, there's plenty of people who head this system to put it, point the blame. And really our anger is a gift from this system, and we have to turn it into a sense of urgency and determination so we can organize and discuss with people around us.
Thanks, Mark. I have Bob and Z, YL, then Tough Love.
Okay, this is Bob and Z, but we're not going to speak in unison. I'm just going to say a few things here. I just right now, everybody's having so many challenging experiences around COVID. One of mine right now is that here in Maryland, they have set up the system where we are this week going to be in the third stage of vaccines, and because of my age, I'm going to be I'm in the third group to be eligible, even though we know that they don't have the vaccine for the people in these groups, and it's very frustrating. I mean, how am I supposed to take my vaccine when I know that there are essential workers in hospitals and in food stores and just so many who are not getting the vaccine that they need, not just for themselves, but for the people that they interact with? Why should I have to make a decision about should I get my vaccine just because I can, or should it go to somebody else? It's the kind of ridiculous question that the system puts in front of us as individuals to deal with the crisis that the system has created. Anyway, I think that on a lot of the issues that Sam and others have raised, it is not easy to talk to a lot of people, but unless you talk to them, you don't know for sure what they're thinking. Things are going to get worse before they get better, and we saw last year how people went into the streets over racist police violence. And so we need to take the opportunities that life presents at work, when we're shopping, when we're trying to get healthcare, to talk to people about the crisis. And I really think that people, we don't know which people are going to be open sooner and which later, but we got to try.
All right, thank you so much, Bob. So we are nearing the end, so we have 3 final people who will go. We have YL, then Tough Love, and then Drew.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. My name's Yael. I teach public school in Oakland. And thanks everyone for presenting. And I've appreciated hearing people's perspectives. I would say that something that frustrated me today is that there was an open letter that went out from doctors at UCSF that was saying that schools need to reopen in February based on 2 data sets, one data set in Marin County and another in North Carolina. And that the reason that we're not going back to school is because the teachers union is so powerful that Gavin Newsom has no choice but to listen to the teachers union, and CTA doesn't want to go back to school. And it's just, it just frustrated me so much because my school right now is facing, we just got results that there's some level of toxic contamination, toxic soil vapor, and the indoor air is contaminated. And so for us to think about going back to school, we're are we going back to a poisoned, contaminated campus? So that doesn't feel great either. And it's ironic because, yes, there's a lot of other issues with reopening, and those are very serious issues. But on another level, it's okay, we're going back to school, we're going back to normal. And the kids, their normal is really messed up. A lot of our schools at the best of times run out of, I would say 3 out of the last 4 years as a teacher, we've run out of paper towels, toilet paper, and or copy paper, which are pretty basic supplies at a school. So, forgive me if I don't really have faith. They're oh, all you need to do is a mask. You're 95%, you're 95% protected if everyone's wearing a mask. It's okay, how many masks are you going to provide? These things that are little logistical details are really a big deal. And so anyway, thank you to the presenters, and thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have next Tough Love, and then Drew.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. So my name is Earl. Tough Love is just one of my emails. I'm not very tough, actually. I just wanted to talk about one thing that I haven't really heard, and that is the usefulness of having a campaign on a pressing issue. COVID is, almost all my phone conversations start or end on COVID with friends from wherever. It's how is it affecting you, who died, whatever. And the fact that there was a national push to go back to work and to let people get sick showed, let me see if I can make this clear in a short way. I think the actual situation we're in shows very clearly the need for a national health service with resources and the ability to plan. we don't have anything. We have the opposite of a national health service. We've got a myriad of local particular situations where profits mean hospitals get closed and so on. It seems to me that campaigning with all the people that we talk to or wherever we interact with people, and be able to say, what we have is garbage. It's oriented for profit. We can show that, but also a national health service is a step away from a profit system that's killing us. And it gives us the ability to bring together all kinds of people, and especially thank you, the people at work who've been having all these little strikes and job actions, and from the hospitals or the centers, everybody is impacted by this. And I think focusing on a campaign and having a demand opens the door to saying, and if we had a socialist society with a working class in power, this is one of the first things we could actually do. Thank you.
Thanks, Earl. All right, and we have Drew finishing us up.
Pressure's on. I don't know why you guys saved me for the last. Just kidding. How to sum up, there's been so many good points and things said in our discussion, especially the presentation. It's a tough time. Everyone knows it's a tough time. It's hard to be a person now. We're so isolated and we have all the problems we have. But as we know, after winter comes spring, and we shouldn't be frustrated now that people aren't mobilizing and in the streets and doing all of this stuff that we want to be doing. Because I think we could all make a safe bet that that will likely come, in the protest movement that we had this past summer. I wouldn't be surprised if we surpass that and involve even more people, and those struggles are even more militant. So between then and now, we should take this time period to network, and find the other people who are like us and outraged and impatient and frustrated and wanting to do something, and build connections with as many people we can. So when that moment arises, we have something to work with and try to push the movement to come beyond where we stopped before. So that's it for me.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
And thanks for wrapping it up. All right, thank you everyone for coming today, and thanks everyone who participated in the discussion, and for Eden, Mark, and Sarah who gave those presentations. So we will be having another event coming up on February 20th. It'll be at the same time. We're going to be discussing the far right in the US and its potential impact. And then make sure before that too, that you keep in contact with us if you're interested in staying in touch. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. You can go to our website, which somebody should be putting in the chat. You can message us, or feel free to message me and I can get you in contact with someone. Thanks again, everyone.